Throughout the hour, we're going to preview every single Sunday matchup so you know who to start and who to sit. We will start with the battle of undefeated teams over in the AFC. The Steelers against the Titans rank. Are you scared of that Steelers defense?
No, I'm scared that I'm just noticing that animation that we were rolling in on. That was excellent. Well done, I should say. But I really like Ryan Tannehill this week. I understand that the matchup on paper looks imposing, but he's had at least 19 fantasy points in 4 or 5 games this season, 7 touchdown passes in his last 2 games combined. The Steelers have been somewhat generous. They've allowed a quarterback to top 17 fantasy points in 4 of their last 5 games. Tannehill, one of the most consistent quarterbacks since last year. I start him without hesitation.
Shout out to the Sunday Showdowns animation, Rank, noticing it. Week 7, I too believe in the Titans offense.
I never get
Rank,
the
but
lead
I
off.
am keeping an eye on Jonnu Smith, who I suggest you beware as he's playing through the ankle injury that's been described as minor, which is something you describe as when it's not your ankle. He's also playing against the top 8 defense against tight ends. Someone whose explosiveness is such a big part of his game. I think we'll learn a lot about the Devin Bush-less Steelers defense in this one. Until we do, I say beware Jonnu. From there we go to the Chiefs Broncos. Marcus, what do we do with the new guy in the Chiefs backfield?
I think we're going to sit Le'Veon Bell. This feels much like a wait-and-see week for him in his first game with the Kansas City Chiefs. If he's on the field, I wouldn't expect a huge number of snaps or a huge number of touches in his first game as he's sort of working into the offense. Plus, on top of it, the matchup is just bad on paper. The Broncos giving up the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to the running back position. So it seems like let's just sit this one out with Lev Bell, and then we'll come back and try again next week.
Yeah, and Andy Reid says he's in no rush to do it. And if you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think that you can start him. But a sleeper I'm looking at in this game is going to be Tim Patrick, who's had at least 100 receiving yards in back-to-back games. You see right there, at least 14 fantasy points in 3 consecutive contests. And he's got a pretty nice little matchup here. Jerry Jeudy, of course, is the headliner, but he is not top 65 receiving yards this season. The stud has been Tim Patrick. So if you need a wide receiver, and we have some good ones out this week, Michael Thomas is out, Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson are on buys, no Devontae Parker. Tim Patrick is somebody that you could start as a sleeper.
Yeah, sneaky loaded offense there if everybody can stay healthy. Let's go to the Jimmy Garoppolo Bowl, MJD. Niners, Pats, you are focused on the other quarterback.
Yeah, I'm going to say beware of Cam Newton. And it's as we can see there, the Niners have allowed the 3rd fewest pass yards. And, I see Cam running, but there's a linebacker on the other side named Fred Warner, who I'm terrified of. I mean, he's flying around right now. I think he's going to be the X factor. I would just beware if you're thinking about starting Cam Newton this week.
If we're also being wary, I would say beware of George Kittle on the other side. Hey, look, you're not starting George Kittle because you can't really find a better tight end option out there. But just keep in mind, the Patriots are allowing the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends. But maybe the most important part is, if there's one thing we have learned about Bill Belichick over the years, that he will find a way to take away the player that is the focal point of your offense. George Kittle is certainly that for San Francisco, and I think stopping him is going to be job number 1 for this Patriots defense.
The Packers get a chance to bounce back against the Texans, right, MJD?
Yeah, I would say start all the Packers receivers you can, but in this case, I'm going to say start MVS. I think this is a huge game for him. The Texans defense has given up 9 touchdowns to receivers. They're trying to outscore people because they know their defense is bad. They went for 2 because they knew the Tennessee Titans were going to go down the field and score, and we know Aaron Rodgers is coming to want to come back. So obviously you're going to start Devontae Adams, but if you have MVS, put him in your lineup as well.
I like that call, MJD, but I also like the tight end in this contest as well. Robert Tonyan, he was limited in practice earlier this week with an ankle injury, so of course keep tabs of that on Sunday morning. You can watch NFL Fantasy Game Day on the all-new NFL Fantasy app. But Tonyan has a good matchup this week against the Texans, who've allowed the 6th most receiving yards per game to tight ends this season. Rodgers is a huge fan of his, so I have no hesitation to start him as long as he is active in that game.
Get back into some Sunday showdowns. The Bucs and the Raiders moved up to Sunday afternoon. Mike, who stands out here?
I think people should beware of Josh Jacobs this week. The Tampa Bay Bucs have allowed less than 50 rushing yards per game to running backs. That's the lowest in the NFL. And I'm not quite sure that the pass game usage is enough to mitigate if Jacobs struggles in the run game. He has 3 catches or fewer in every game since week 1. And if the Bucs can contain him on the ground and not let him find the end zone, he has yet to score 15 fantasy points in a game without a touchdown this year. So he's more of an RB2 opposed to the normal RB1 that he is every week.
In that game, I would probably tell you other weeks to avoid one-week wonders. Well, what if that one-week wonder is going to the Hall of Fame? Gronk is available in about 34% of leagues. If you're streaming tight ends, which many are at this point, I say it's worth a shot. He had a season high in targets, yards, and his first touchdown all season against the Packers defense. Why not against the Raiders, Robert? Why not? Let's go over to the Panthers and the Saints. Rank, you like one of these quarterbacks specifically.
And it's the one who might not be going to the Hall of Fame, and that's Teddy Bridgewater, who I think is a sleeper. And we've been pretty spot on with when to deploy Teddy Bridgewater. We told you last week to sit him. He did not have a great game against the Chicago Bears, but this week you can get him back into his lineup, or get him back into your lineup, I should say. The Saints have allowed close to 24 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. That's fourth most in the NFL, and they've allowed the second most passing touchdowns to quarterbacks this season at 15, so he is a safe, reliable option.
I love that call, Rank, and because I love it, I think you can play his wide receiver and DJ Moore this week. Moore saw 11 targets last week. He has scored 14 or more fantasy points in 2 straight games. And right now, the Saints have allowed the 5th most receiving touchdowns per game to wide receivers. And I just think this could become a track meet type game in the Superdome with a lot of points scored.
You know what? I always have trouble with the DJs, DJ Moore, DJ Chark. Which one should I start?
Oh, that's tough. I have them back to back, I believe, with DJ Chark just ahead.
Love the names. The names makes basically the same player. Let's go over to the Battle of the Buckeye State. Cleveland and Cincinnati. Florio, who are you starting?
I'm really excited to get T. Higgins into my lineups this week. The Browns have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per game to wide receivers this year. Joe Burrow's best game of the year came against Cleveland, and in that game, they were peppering A.J. Green with targets. But since then, T. Higgins has kind of replaced A.J. Green as their top option out wide. He leads them in fantasy points and a bunch of other stats since week 3. I think a lot of volume is going to go Higgins' way in this good matchup.
Yeah, and on the other side, Mike, I've got Odell Time back in session. He's back against a bad defense, had a couple of weeks off against good defenses. And I wouldn't be too worried about Baker's ability to play with that chest injury. In fact, I think that might increase the likelihood that Stefanski uses Odell in trick shot plays. Maybe not 38 points, but I think mid-20s is good for that volatile offense. That Browns offense not being as reliable as fantasy managers had hoped, but MJD says one of Cleveland's fantasy mainstays is on his nice list this holiday shopping season. Yes, maybe a bit early. Fired up to see the Seahawks and the Cardinals square off in this one, which was moved to Sunday night. We're back here with Adam Rank, Marcus Grant, Michael F. Florio. Florio, give us someone we can start in this primetime showdown.
I think you could start Christian Kirk against the Seattle defense. Kirk is coming off a season high in fantasy points last week. His fantasy points have increased in every game this year. He has 3 touchdowns in his last 3, and there is no better matchup for wide receivers than Seattle, who've allowed the most fantasy points and the most receiving yards per game to the position. Plus, D-Hop's a little banged up, so I think definitely get Christian Kirk in your starting lineup.
While the Seahawks might be friendly to wide receivers, they're not so friendly to running backs, which is why you should beware of Kenyon Drake. I mean, only one player has had more than 65 rushing yards in a game against the Seahawks this season, and I know we were all excited to see Kenyon Drake finally have that huge breakout game last week against the Cowboys, but he's only had that one game with more than 15 fantasy points, so this could be another week where he sort of comes back down to earth. I get it because of the buys you have to start him, but you don't have to be excited about it.
All right, let's look over to the rivalry between the football team and the Cowboys. Rank, you like one of the Cowboys wideouts?
Yeah, you know what? I'm still going to go back to CeeDee Lamb in this game against the FT, who have allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. I just really feel this is going to be a bounce-back game for the Cowboys. Anytime we see a team go out there, get humiliated like they were in prime time, they bounce back the next week.
The bounce back theme for me, too. I know there's a lot of disappointed Michael Gallup managers out there, but if there's a game you want the deep shot guy against, it's against this Washington team that's given up deep scores to Bobby Trees, Dallas Goedert, Mark Andrews, twice Darius Slayton. They're going to give him some chances. I say hold on to Michael Gallup in your starting lineup for one more week. Let's go over to the Jags and the Chargers now. Marcus, who do you like in this one?
I think that Gardner Minshew can be a stream this week going up against this Chargers defense. He has, outside of that one Thursday night blow-up, he scored 18 fantasy points in every game and has finished between QB 11 and 13 in all of those games. So he's been very safe. And this week against the Chargers team that has allowed the third most fantasy points to quarterbacks, I think he can showcase his upside as well.
Sam Darnold expected to return to the Jets starting lineup as they face off against the Bills. Florio, give us a must start in this one.
It's Josh Allen. I know he's let you down after scoring 25 fantasy points his first 4 games. The last 2 haven't really lived up to that, but he's going to make it up to you. This is a get-right game. He's going to get back on track against the Jets. He scored 28 fantasy points against them in week 1, including 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing 1. He's been running a little bit more again lately. I think he's going to have a monstrous game, and I have him as my QB3 in the week 7 rankings.
You know, Floyo, you're exactly right. And this is like a rare situation where you can start all the Bills, start everybody. If you get a piece of them, try to start them. The defense, Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, everybody. Get everyone going in there because guess what? The New York Jets have kind of hung it up. I mean, they're trading guys left and right. I just can't believe they traded a guy before the game and then played him. And then he got in the car and drove to Tampa. So when they're doing things like that, just play everybody. This is one of those rare opportunities. Make sure you get your guys in there. And Stephon Diggs should have a big day.
Playing everybody, love that. It's playing the Jets probably for the rest of the season. Last but not least, Lions Falcons. Lions number 27 against opposing running backs. That means I say start Todd Gurley. Coming off his second worst fantasy performance of the year against the Vikings, his team had a lot of success. I feel good about him getting in the end zone against Detroit. If you have him, you're probably starting him anyway. But if you're wealthy at the position, you should still start Todd Gurley this week.
I agree, Patrick. And on the other side of that, I think you start Matt Stafford. This is all about the matchup. The Falcons have allowed the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. They've allowed at least 20 fantasy points to the position in every game this year and multiple passing touchdowns. They've allowed a top 12 quarterback in 5 of the 6 games. And the one they didn't was just because the Bears made a quarterback switch. If you combined them, it would have been 6 out of 6. Start your quarterbacks against them.